Hello, everyone, and welcome to Musing, music for the adventurous listener here on CJSW 90.9 FM in Calgary and on all your favorite podcast platforms. I'm your host, Janna Sailor. Thanks for joining me as we explore the stories, inspirations, and creative journeys of Canada's composers and musical innovators. This week, we are delighted to welcome acclaimed Canadian composer, Jeffrey Ryan. One of Canada's most celebrated contemporary composers, Jeffrey's music has been performed by leading orchestras, ensembles, and soloists across the country and internationally. His distinguished career includes 4 Juno Award nominations, multiple Western Canadian Music Award nominations, and recognition as the 2025 Western Canadian Music Awards Classical Composer of the Year. Known for his richly expressive musical language and masterful orchestration, Jeffrey's work spans orchestral, chamber, vocal, and operatic repertoire. Among his large-scale projects is Afghanistan, Requiem for a Generation, a powerful collaboration with poet Suzanne Steele that reflects on the human cost of conflict and that has resonated deeply with audiences across Canada. Today, we'll discuss Jeffrey's most recent works, creative process, collaborations, the role of storytelling in his music, and what continues to inspire his work. So, let's listen in. Welcome, Jeffrey Ryan. It's so great to be in conversation with you today. Welcome to Musing.
It's fantastic to be here with you today. Thank you so much.
So I'm going to dive right in. A big question to start off with, perhaps, but how do you describe your creative output and yourself as a composer?
Why not start with the easy questions, right? You know what? It's interesting because I just actually had to answer this question in writing for some application or something. I can't remember now, but I had to think about it. I love live musicians and live music, and that's what I write for. The only thing really music-wise that I haven't done is worked with electronics. I'm not a fan of electronic sound. I'm a big fan of acoustic sound. So that said, I love writing for all kinds of combinations of live players. I love being part of a collaborative process where my job is to put on the page as clearly and succinctly as possible what my intention is, and then to turn it over to someone or a group of people and let them add their layer to it. And then the audience adds their layer to it. So I think of that as an equilateral triangle of the composer, the performer, the audience, and that we're all part of this experience where we all meet in the middle, which is where the piece itself lives. So that's always how I think about what I do. And another element of that is that Over the years, I've come to understand that there are three kinds of listeners. There are listeners who listen primarily with their heads, and those are people who might recognize an idea that came back later in the piece, or they see connections in the things that they're hearing, or they think, oh, that was really interesting color. What made that sound? Oh, what happens to that color? That kind of thing. They're engaging in that way. The next group is the listener who listens primarily with their heart. They're looking for the emotional journey of the piece. How does it make them feel? Where are the highs and lows of the piece? And that's their entry into a piece of music. And the third group is the listener that listens with their bodies. They're the people who feel the pulse, whether it's a fast piece where they're bobbing their head or they're tapping their foot, they're feeling that pulse, or it's a slow piece where their breath slows down and their heartbeat slows down and their muscles relax. I try to write for all three of those listeners. And I don't think necessarily that a listener is one kind of listener to the exclusion of the others. But I think there's a primary way that different people listen. And I try to write music that allows each of those listeners to find their way into the music and into the experience. So that's very much on my mind as I'm crafting a piece and exploring an idea. I have a bunch of Post-it notes on my computer that are little reminders to myself. I work with pencil and paper and manuscript paper at my desk, and I'll go over to the piano to check things. It's not until I'm entering the score, do the final notation, that I go to the computer. I know that's very old school, but I think pushing notes around on the page and imagining sound is a way that works really well for me. And I have found that often if you start at the computer, you end up writing music that sounds really great on the computer. And it really is restricted, if that's a word I can use, to what your particular notation program does well. And that could be really great music. But if there's a sound that you're imagining that you can't make on a computer, then you're kind of stuck. I write on paper, but I do have these Post-it notes. And one of them says, I am the first audience. When I'm writing, I imagine myself in the hall watching the performers play. I imagine myself being the audience for that piece. So I try to step back, even as much as I get into the weeds in the compositional process, I always try to step back and try to experience the piece as a listener. And if I'm listening to that piece as the first audience and I'm not really interested in it, then I'm not doing my job. No one else is going to be interested. So it has to pass me as the first audience before it ever has a hope of making it to a different audience. Two other Post-its that I have. One just says risk. Every piece that I write has something in it where I'm not 100% sure is going to work. That's how we all grow as artists, right?
You remember it. You remember it as winter, but what you see are leaf shadows. Leaf shadows on the cupboard door. Black in the moonlight, shifting a little. Shifting a little in some breeze. Then still. 3 a.m. barefoot in the kitchen, moon shadows, of the lilac on the cupboard door, gathered with you on the threshold. You are only trying to say, what you see in the world. Spring, winter, even knowing what you love, is no salvation. Their heart shapes, trembling in the moonlight, sharp as frost.
I've been a professional freelance composer since 1996. So it's been 30 years. The chances that I take are generally educated risks because I think this is going to work, but I've never done it quite like this before. I think it's going to work. And then when you start collaborating with the performers, you find out whether you're right or not. Now, if that's an art song or a chamber piece, when there's a rehearsal process that might be extended or there might be a workshop process, then you get the chance to fix those things. If you're writing a piece for orchestra and you're taking some chances, the first time you hear the orchestra put the notes out into the world for the first time is 2 days before the premiere, right? So there isn't a lot of time to make adjustments. And the other post-it note that I'll mention to you is a quotation from CBC Radio's Dead Dog Cafe Comedy Hour from many years ago. And that ended at, you may know this if you ever listened, the last thing they say is, and remember, stay calm, be brave, wait for the signs. And that has been the watch phrase for my whole career. As a freelancer, I've never been in the position to say, oh, an orchestra calls me up and says, we're interested in commissioning you for this particular concert with these pieces, and would you be available? Here's the timeline. I'm never going to say, oh, you know what? I just did an orchestra piece. I'd really like to do something else. I'm just going to pass. That doesn't happen. There's a sign there. It's like, no, this sign is coming your way. Just go with that. And then another aspect of stay calm, be brave, wait for the signs is that, again, I'm a freelancer. And that means that you have to be willing to ride the wave. There are going to be crests in that wave. There are going to be troughs in that wave. And every few years, there's a trough. And you have to believe in what you're doing and keep doing things and stay calm. Even though you're looking at, oh, it's been 6 months and I haven't had any income. Okay. Well, I mean, that happened. There was a 6-month period where I had absolutely no work. And I took a lot of that time to update my Finale files to a newer version of Finale. So I got a lot of re-editing done on my catalog. So the time did not go to waste. But I was paying for that time out of my savings and my line of credit, which was eventually going to have to be paid back. But I did my best to stay calm. And right about the time that it got to the point where I had to ask myself, okay, you've had other jobs in your life. What else would you like to do? And then a call came and a commission came And then everything opened up after that. Sometimes I think the universe has tested me with giving me no's and giving me obstacles just to see how much I really want to do this. And if I stay calm and I be brave and I wait for the signs, so far, the signs always eventually come.
Can you tell me a bit more about the importance of building a relationship with ensembles, whether that be an orchestra or Gryphon trio or a choir, in the development of a composer's compositional voice and also their career trajectory?
One of the things that I tell younger composers, if you're looking to get out in the world and establish yourself as a composer and get a career going, is that when you're starting, write for your friends because they will play your music. And the people that you meet, if you happen to go the path of going to a university, it doesn't always have to be this way because you can have friends outside of university, of course. But if you have a flutist friend and that person says, I'd really like to play a piece of yours and I'm doing a recital and I'm going to be doing a 6-concert tour in the Lower Mainland, for example. Would you write a piece? I will play it on all the concerts. I'll do a really good recording for you. And when you're starting out, I don't have any money, but this is what I can give you. When you're starting out, that's the time to say yes to that because your friend will go out in the world and take your music there. And I know some of your listeners are probably thinking, well, that's doing it for the exposure. But when you're starting out, the reality is that you deserve to be paid for your music, but you have to realize that what you get paid is not always cash. Be clear in your mind what you are getting out of this. So I start out that way, and I tell younger composers to start out that way. A lot of it comes from being nice to everybody that you meet and being open to conversations and being mutually supportive of each other's work. You start to build those relationships, and it doesn't necessarily start with a commission. The commission that you write for this ensemble or that ensemble, that might follow after you've gotten to know them for 4 or 5 years. Maybe, you've introduced them at a concert. I did a lot of work for Music Toronto, for example, introducing new music from the stage for the audience. I met a lot of people that way. Very few of them became commissions, but some of them did, but that was beside the point. You're just part of the whole ecosystem. There is a tremendous advantage, though, of writing for people that you know, because you can easily go to them and say, I'm thinking about this. Can you do this? Does that? I'm imagining it like this. When I've written for the Gryphon Trio, there, for example, I play a really mean air violin and a really fantastic air cello. I don't know 100% that they're going to work. So when we get into the rehearsal room, or I just send things along, and maybe it's a snippet, a little screenshot saying, this is what I'm thinking, does this work? And then you can talk to the players and they can say, what is it that you're looking for exactly? Oh, okay, you know what? I can do it easier if I do it like this. It's like, oh, okay. And so having that real kind of connection, I can learn a lot from that. But also I can write a piece that is tailored to their strengths. And that is absolutely something that I think about every time I write a piece, is I want this to be a piece that fits these performers like a glove. And that is not to say that someone else might not come along and play that piece and bring their own layer to it. But you want to show off the strengths of the people that you're writing for. And that is never more true than when you're writing for singers. Absolutely adore writing for singers. So many of my friends in Cleveland were singers, and I was hanging out with all the singers. And from my years of singing Shirley Jones's part, I knew what it was like to be a singer. But every singer is unique. So whenever I'm writing for a singer, if I have an opportunity to write for someone that I've never written for before, even if it's someone that I've heard their other performances of other music, or if I've known them for a while, I have a list of questions that I ask singers. So what's your top public note? Not the top note that you warm up to. What's your top public note? What's your bottom public note? What's your happy place? Where do you like to live most of the time, where you feel you can do absolutely anything you want, where you have all of your colors, all of your dynamics, everything that you could want to draw on? What's that range where you can just keep going and going? What's some repertoire that you feel really suits you, that you absolutely love to sing? And then I'll go and listen to those pieces and I'll try to see, oh, okay. And you try to connect all the dots in terms of the information that they've given you. What are some things that you feel your voice does really well, that you like to show off? And I'll tell you, sometimes get the opposite answer to that question. Sometimes it's, I feel like my voice is pretty flexible and it can do a lot. Here are some things that composers have asked of me that I absolutely hate. But, over the years of knowing a performer, whether that's the initial conversation or whether that's years down the line of knowing a performer and hearing how they play, in your head, you start to picture that person on the stage. And you know what? It's absolutely true when you're a composer in residence with an orchestra. When I was writing for the symphony, I was at so many rehearsals and so many concerts. I knew what that orchestra sounded like. I knew all the players. I knew where the strengths were, and I could write to them. And that's a great synergy because the performers appreciate that as well. It shows that you care about them and that you're thinking about them. So it's knowing who you're writing for is a really wonderful thing. And you just have to be open to meeting more players and you go to lots of concerts. And if it's someone you don't know and you really liked what they did, you find them in the lobby afterwards and you introduce yourself and you tell them how much you liked their performance. And I'm a composer. Would it be okay for me to just connect with you by email or whatever? And you can forge a relationship that way. There's so many different ways that it can happen. And as we move through the world and through our careers, you just have to always keep your eyes open for those signs.
I'd like to circle back to, you were talking about singers and your relationships with singers. You have some wonderful opera projects that are about to be released into the world in the next while, specifically in collaboration with librettist Michael Lewis McClellan. There's the Laurels, I believe, and also Motherland. Can we dive into those and to this very fruitful working relationship with a librettist?
Working with Michael MacLennan is such a gift, and I'll tell you how that happened. Tapestry opera, I'm not sure what form it takes now, but back in the day, they did something called the Composer Librettist Lab. And it was intended for composers and writers who were interested in working in opera. And you did a week-long intensive. Now, the shape of that changed over the years, but when I did it, and when Michael did it, we did not do it in the same year. He did it the year before me. But the year that I did it, there were 4 composers and 4 writers. And the routine was that on day 1, each composer was paired with a writer. So I was paired with a writer, and we all got the same assignment. And then the team would go off together, come up with an idea. You'd sketch that out together. That might be maybe a 5-minute scene. And then the librettist would go off and write the libretto for that. Then you'd meet and discuss it. And then the composer would go home and stay up until 4 a.m. and write a scene, however long it was, usually around 5 minutes, for 2 singers and piano. They had a resident quartet of singers and 1 or 2 pianists. I can't remember now, but you got a different pairing of voices every time as well. The 4 singers didn't have to learn all the scenes all the time. So the next morning I would come in, I would deliver yesterday's scene, and then I would be paired with a new writer, and we would start the process over again. And then each afternoon we'd hear a workshop of the scene that we had done the day before. It was super intense. But one of the things that it teaches you is that you have to churn some music out, and you learn to trust your instincts. And you're going to hear that come back at you in workshop, and you're going to get feedback while it's all super fresh in your head. So I went through that experience, and Michael went through that experience the year before. There were no writers in my year that I really clicked with. And in Michael's year, there were no composers that he really clicked with. And Wayne Strongman, who was at that time artistic director of Tapestry Opera, thought we would make a good team. So we were both living in Toronto at the time, not far from each other. So I put together a bunch of recordings and scores and put them in a bag. And he took a bunch of his plays and put them in a bag. And I went and knocked on his door, and we handed each other a bag. And then I went off and read his plays. And there is so much music in the way that he uses words. And this is something, because I write a lot for singers, I'm always on the lookout for poetry that speaks music to me. And Michael's words speak music to me. So Tapestry decided to do a little mini Lib Lab. The Composer Librettist Lab was affectionately known as the Lib Lab. So we did a Lib Lab in Wayne Strongman's dining room and came up with an idea. And the prompt that we ended up giving ourselves was, a woman is cutting through a city park at night and realizes someone is following her. That was the prompt. And that led to the Laurels. That was back in, we probably started it in 2001. So it ended up being a 14-minute mini chamber opera. The idea of it just worked so well that Tapestry started this whole project called Opera to Go, which was a whole series of 15-minute operas that they could put in different combinations. What was great about the process, because as the composer, I was involved from the beginning. We were working out the story together. Then Michael would write the libretto. Then we would workshop the libretto. He and me and Wayne would read the libretto and ask questions. And so I'm already hearing all the music. So I knew exactly what it was, how it was going to start, even before I'd written a single note. Oh, that ended up being commissioned by Tapestry and was part of a workshop process and was premiered at the Opera America conference, which was in Toronto in 2002, as part of a group of 4 operas to go. Ours was the first one. And we just loved doing it. And I love setting Michael's words because it's so easy. And because he's a playwright, he writes for TV, he's written for movies. He has an incredible sense of narrative and timing. And those kinds of things are really important to me as a composer, not even just in operatic music, but in any kind of music, of where the beats, where the emotional beats in the narrative of any piece that I'm working on. It just worked super well. And it's had a number of stage productions over the years. It's had a number of concert performances over the years. 2 or 3 years ago, it was part of an evening of Canadian short operas at the Glen Gould School in Toronto. And the director is a woman named Dana Fradkin. She had done some work with Vancouver Opera and some other. She was involved in a number of things, but also opera. And she absolutely loved the piece and said to me, I really see this as a film. And I said, well, I've always seen it as a film. I think it would work really well as a film. She said, I want to make it into a film. And I said, let's talk. Last Friday, as we're talking, May 1st, saw the release of the studio recording of The Laurels, which is just totally a dream come true. It's a piece that Michael and I really love, and we've been really fortunate that over the years there have been a number of outings of the piece in different forms with different singers. It's a two-hander, an instrumental ensemble of 7. It's a psychological thriller. It's a retelling, a modern retelling of the Daphne and Apollo myth, except that instead of Daphne being turned into a tree at the end, like in the myth, she turns the tables on the guy that's following her, and it becomes something that you didn't know was happening. It's total twist that makes you review everything, like The Sixth Sense, in a way where you get the twist and you go, oh, but I thought it was this, and oh, but I see how it wasn't. Okay. So because Dana wanted to make this film, it became an opportunity for us to do a studio recording. So we were fortunate to get some money from Factor that helped, and we recorded it last fall. Jacqueline Woodley is singing the role of Laurel, and Nathan Keoughan is the stranger. And they were both phenomenal to work with. We put together a fantastic band here in Vancouver, went into CBC Studio One. The recording is phenomenal, and it's now out and it's streaming, and you can all hear it. And then at the end of July, this summer, it goes to camera, starring Jacqueline and Nathan. It takes place in a park, so I think it's all happening outdoors, and I'm hoping to go and just be a fly on the wall. I'm fascinated by that process, and my job's done. So I can just sit back and watch it all unfold. So that is super, super exciting.
He found me
shadow.
Darker than blood.
See what you run from.
Wild shapes of men.
You know me, you do.
Looming needs.
Turn and face me.
Darker than blood.
Think why I chase you, the one who still loves you. Now, even now,
He tears at my
I
heels.
am not your wolf.
His breath on my neck.
You are not my lamb.
His voice in my
Even in
head.
flight you urge me on. The winds fling your hair, so it flies back to me. Your rampant legs
The other big project that is happening is the world premiere of Motherland with the Vancouver Bach Choir. That is an opera oratorio that has been in development for, I think we calculated 17 or 18 years. It was not the second thing that Michael and I started working on, but it was maybe the third thing. It's gone through a whole series of steps. It was originally going to be a piece for the professional choir at Rosehill United Church in Toronto. And then shortly after we had finished the libretto and workshopped the libretto, there was that nasty thing in 2008 called the global financial crisis. And suddenly there was no money around for this, so it had to go on hold. And over the years, through the good fortune of being blessed with different supporters at different points, it had an opportunity to move forward, and then it would stall, and then it would move forward, and then it would stall, and then it would move forward, and then it would stall. We eventually got to the point where there was a complete piano vocal. It's a 75-minute, 80-minute single movement. I think the future of opera is in one-act chamber operas. And this is a one-act chamber opera, although there's a very important role for the chorus. And we were originally conceiving it as a choral opera, where it wouldn't be a big chorus necessarily, but there was a very important role to play for the chorus. It wasn't just about the soloist. And it was also important to us to write an opera where the two leads are both women and neither of them dies at the end. It's a wonderful, I know it's revolutionary, really. So those were all really great things that were important to us. We'd gotten to the point that there was a complete piano vocal. And it's challenging for me in the sense that I write to full score. So whenever I'm writing an orchestra piece, I write to the full manuscript. And I had to do this also with Afghanistan Requiem for a Generation, which had a similar kind of need, which was that there had to be a piano part before there was an orchestral or an instrumental ensemble part. But I'm hearing all of the instrumental colors. So basically what I have to do is imagine the instrumental sounds and then in my head condense it to a piano reduction. And then the final step would be to blow it back out into a full score. And in this case, it was going to be a sinfonietta. And we were waiting for that opportunity. And I had the idea, because I've been in Vancouver a long time, I know a lot of people here. I know Les Dalla, who conducts at Vancouver Opera and the Vancouver Bach Choir. I know a lot of singers. I went to Les and said, I have this piece. It's had a lot of stops and starts. We have this one final step, and then it can go to the stage. And we've rethought of it as not necessarily a piece that has to be staged. It could be done with a bigger choir and treated as an oratorio. There are lots of opera oratorios, right? To me, it opened up possibilities for performance. And Les said, I want to do it. And thanks to the Bach Choir, it's happening. So for most of last year, I scored out that piano reduction and did all the copying and delivered everything the end of the year. And now it's going to come to pass next week. It's a story of immigration of a refugee trying to establish a life for themselves in their new country. That was one of the things that struck Michael and me all the years that we were developing this piece, is that every time we came back to it, immigration and refugees issues in Canada were front page news, not always for good reasons. So it was really important. And there are a lot of operas that will use a really old story to comment on today. And this opera is based on the biblical book of Ruth, the shortest book in the Bible. And it's fiction. And it was basically written as a lesson of how to welcome someone who is different from you, how to welcome the stranger and welcome them into your world, because you never know what that person has to offer. The lesson is that's the right thing to do, that as humans, we need to help each other. So we use that old story to comment on what happens today. And I look at Boaz, for people who know the story. I won't go into all of the details of the story, but Boaz is basically the landowner, and Ruth, as a refugee, has to scrabble around and pick up little bits of barley and stuff to get food. She's looked at with suspicion by the people in her new home. Boaz, on the other hand, sees the good in her and, to me, represents the land, the state, the government, if you will, that welcomes and supports and appreciates everything that the newcomer has to offer. And so the community, which is the chorus, also has kind of a journey to make in terms of learning to accept Ruth. So it ends very happily. Symbolically, Ruth and Boaz get married. They do in the original story. That wasn't made up by us, just to have a happy ending. But to me, that represents Ruth becoming fully accepted and becoming a recognized citizen of her new land. Ruth's original music at the beginning has a particular style. The different characters are characterized by different kinds of music. Ruth's music has particular elements at the beginning. And when she moves to her new home, and as she becomes more accepted, her music starts to become a blend of her original music, which is part of her identity. And also it starts to take on characteristics of the music of her new land as well. So she creates her own voice that is who she was and who she is now together in one person, which I think is a really great message when people come to Canada. I think we're enriched by people who bring different traditions, different holidays, different festivals, different ways of looking at the world. We're all made richer for that. And we don't want people to give up those things, but at the same time, they learn about what the festivals, the occasions, the culture is that they've now become a part of. And that's really, for me, the message of the piece, if we can step back and think what the larger themes are. But at the same time, it's a story of a woman struggling to make a new home for herself and ultimately succeeding. It's a love story as well. Who doesn't love that in an opera? What operas are not about love stories on some level or other? And then there's a happy ending. She has a lot of struggles along the way, but she thrives. And that's what's important.
watchmen to and fro to mark the shore. The farmer does not know that they are there. He walks with heavy feet, counting the bread and wine by autumn's game. But I smile to think that days remain, perhaps to be, in which the breath be safe no more, and red wine warm my blood in vain. I shall be glad remembering how the fleet lie the poppies ran like torchmen with the wheat.
What do you hope that people take away from their experience of your music, whether that be one of your larger scale works like your Requiem for a Generation or Motherland or your chamber works? Is there a kind of a goal that you set out to convey or that they take away with them from the experience of your work?
That's an interesting question because absolutely I try to think about what's the experience that I want that audience member to have. On the other hand, I have no control over that because every listener listens in their own way. And I talked about that earlier of the different kinds of listener. What I'm hoping is that they're going to be invited into the world of that piece and that it will connect with them in some way, whether that's in their head, in their heart, in their body, that they will have their own experience that where we have our own triangle of composer, performer, and that audience member that we've all shared in that experience. I had a piece that the Gryphon Trio has taken on tour, a piece that I wrote for them called Chimera. And at one of the performances that I was at, because they were touring BC, in my introductory talk, I will usually try to say something like, and it's a 12-minute piece. And so people kind of have a sense of what they're in for. And someone came up to me and said, that piece finished. And I turned to my friend and I said, that was 12 minutes? Because it was over in a flash. And that says to me, that listener was so engaged in every moment of that piece, in the trajectory of that piece, in where that piece took her, that she didn't have a sense of time. And that is a fantastic thing for me to hear because that's the kind of experience that I hope an audience member will have, that they are in that moment so connected to what they're hearing in whatever way they connect, that they lose sense of time. And I'll tell you another story. The first piece that I wrote for the VSO was called The Linearity of Light. It's a 12-minute piece. There was a performance some years later by the Okanagan Symphony under Rose Thomson of The Linearity of Light. And at the intermission, these two older ladies came up to me and said, we're both retired dancers. And when we heard your piece, it was all we could do to not get up and dance. And I'm like, thank you. I get so verklempt when something connects in that way. And I realized that my music isn't for everyone, right? I try to write music that invites people in, the people that want to come in and be a part of that. I hope that they'll be taken along and find something that speaks to them there. So that's a big part of what I want for the audience. That's my hope for the kinds of experiences that the audience can have at the same time as a composer. I absolutely love collaborating with the players. I love getting in the weeds of, is this a B flat or is this a B natural? and those kinds of things, and really digging into an idea and just finding all the ways that I can express that idea in an engaging shape. And then you turn it over to the players who turn it over to the audience, and you just see what they bring to it. It's always exciting and it's always different.
That's a beautiful way to leave it. Jeffrey Ryan, thank you so much for being my guest today on Musing. It's been such a pleasure to do a deep dive into your work.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much.
This has been Musing on CJSW 90.9 FM in Calgary. I am your host, Janna Sailor. Thanks for tuning in. As we close today's episode of Musing, we acknowledge and honor the Indigenous peoples of these lands as the original music makers, storytellers, creators, and caretakers of artistic and cultural knowledge across what is now known as Canada. We recognize that music, ceremony, and song have existed here since time immemorial, and we are grateful for the opportunity to listen, learn, and share space through artistic practice. Musing is a production of the Canadian Music Centre Prairie Region. Until next time, thanks for listening and for supporting Canadian artists in your community.